And that's when it became really obvious to me that this was not an individual issue, right? The system is the problem. We are being asked to do so much without help. It's a work issue. It has to do with what we expect from moms. It has to do with social media. It has so many different contributions. But what I know for sure is that parenting is always going to be hard. Raising humans is going to be a challenge, but the amount of stress that we carry doesn't have to be there.
I'm Amy.
And I'm Abby. And as women, we are constantly comparing ourselves to others. But your life isn't supposed to look like hers. Being your best self means standing firm in your decisions and always being willing to grow with a purpose.
We get vulnerable and real with an honest look into the challenges and triumphs we all face. Every woman listening gets the opportunity to choose what life looks like for herself. Hi, you guys. Today on the podcast, we have Dr. Ann Welsh, who is a psychologist, an executive coach, and a consultant that has a deep passion for empowering women on their leadership journeys. In this episode, we truly dived into all things that are around being a working mom. So as you guys know, Abby and I have been working moms for 9 years. She has a ton of experience and a ton of clients at this point in her life. So it was a really candid conversation about what comes up for all three of us, what areas we still need to work on. I love the conversation. I wish I would have had it earlier. So we're hoping that it really helps a lot of you out there.
So let's start out by talking about why working parent stress, in your opinion, is a systemic issue and not just an individual issue.
Yeah. I mean, I think this is like if you don't take anything home from this episode except it's not you, it's the system, that would be it. Just my own story, rewind 15 years. I'm working at Harvard. I had just had my second kid and I felt like I was drowning. I had this unimaginable caseload, being asked to do way more in 40 hours than was possible. And I was coming home to kids who were tough. One was later diagnosed with autism, one with ADHD. I couldn't be the mom I wanted to be and the clinician that I wanted. And I thought it was me. I really did. And I ended up leaving and starting my own practice and skip forward a few years. I ended up doing a lot of specialized training in maternal mental health. And then, not surprisingly, I basically started seeing the same thing in client after client. And that's when it became really obvious to me that this was not an individual issue, right? The system is the problem. We are being asked to do so much without help. It's a work issue. It has to do with what we expect from moms. It has to do with social media. It has so many different contributions. But what I know for sure is that parenting is always going to be hard. Raising humans is going to be a challenge, but the amount of stress that we carry doesn't have to be there. We're not doing it wrong. It's hard because it's hard, but we can also make it a little easier if we have the support that we need.
So interesting. I was a nurse at a major medical center. Abby was working in corporate America. Now we work for ourselves. One thing that has not changed is there is some stress involved with different work settings. And so I think sometimes we really get this idea that the grass is greener somewhere else. And that can be true to some extent. But because you coach a lot of working moms, you know that stress is present for, I would say, all of us. So how do you help your clients reframe their stress?
Yeah, I think there's a great question and there's a few important things. And the very first one echoes what I just said, right? To recognize this is not you. Every single mom that comes into my group program voices something along the lines of, I'm overwhelmed, I feel like I'm failing, or I don't know who I am anymore, or what I even want for my career, or I'm confused, or I miss myself. Once we have that context of knowing this is not a me problem, and remind ourselves of that on a regular basis, we can at least stop the shame spiral, right? We can stop that secondary reaction to the stress that says, not only am I stressed, I'm stressed about being stressed, right? So we can kind of shortcut that. The other piece is there's a few things, right, to remember. One is to remember there's no perfect parent. We cannot approach parenting in a black or white, good and bad way. We are going to mess it up all the time. And what matters is the repair. that is what we want to send our kids out into the world with, the ability to repair and forgive themselves and forgive other people. The second piece is, I think so many of us feel like we're flailing because we've lost sight of what we want. And we have to recognize that that might not line up with the million of expectations that other people have of us, but it's really, really important to ask ourselves what we want, because that's what gives us resiliency and fuel. And along with that, the third thing I would say is you have to give yourself permission to be a human outside of the needs of your kids, right? I think we have the story that moms are supposed to just be moms and that everything else is kind of extraneous. And we actually do ourselves and our kids a disservice if we say mom is the only identity that I hold. In some ways, that's a lot of pressure on them, right? If the only thing that brings me joy and happiness my entire life is my kids, that actually puts some kind of unfair rules on them about what they're allowed to be, both by example and because then they're maybe a little too concerned with your well-being. So we really need those other pieces of ourselves to help alleviate some of that stress.
Well, I'm really glad you touched on that because, and I've said this on the podcast before, when I was a first-time working mom, and so I had work and I had this little baby that I loved so much and this new role for me, I really felt like there was no time to do anything. Like I almost felt like work was the break. Like I'm away from him to work, so I shouldn't then choose to be away from him more. And what I realized later is that was a recipe for what Abby's going to talk about next, which is burnout. So I'm just hoping that we're talking to some moms that we can kind of help them course correct from going down that road that a lot of us learn that the hard way. And so having conversations like this, we're really hoping to inspire other women to keep some semblance of self.
Yeah. Just to piggyback on that, I think it's so common when we first become parents, right? Because, if you think of your identity as like this pie and you're trying to add in a new piece, a really, really big, important piece, it feels like there's no room for it. So you just kind of put it on top of everything else. But really that transition to parenthood over time is like making space for the mom piece, but also recognizing there are other pieces there. And those pieces are important too.
Yeah. And that burnout, it can last so long. Like we can feel it so intensely in the moment, but then our bodies keep the score. So even years afterwards, you can still feel some of that. I mean, I can still like put myself back into the position of having those tiny little babies and just the burnout that you feel from making those transitions. And now the burnout feels different. But on your Instagram, you shared something that really stuck with us. And you said, burnout is not the price of being a good parent. So we know that everyone's work situation, it looks different, but just some overarching suggestions. What can we do to help control that burnout from just really taking over our lives?
Yeah. So, I think for a general overview, I think everyone should read Emily Nagoski's Burnout if you haven't already. It's a really wonderful tool for understanding burnout in a larger way, for understanding some of the gender socialization that goes into it. She's like a master of like the storytelling, really tangible advice combination. But I think the other piece is to recognize that burnout and getting around it is not a one size fits all solution. Like the tools that work for me may not work for someone else. We each have our own unique nervous systems that react to stresses in different ways and specific ways. And so one of the tools I teach in my mom's groups is how to map your own nervous system and understand the unique regulation tools that work for you. That said, there are kind of a general couple places to start. And I like to speak about beliefs, boundaries, and bandwidth. So with beliefs, we're talking about your values and your needs. What do you need? What's important to you? And how are you living in a way that is or is not aligned with those values? That might mean if you're feeling burnt out that you need a career pause. It might mean you need a career pivot, right? To do something different. It might even mean you push in your career and kind of move up or forward in it, but in a different or more intentional way. That it's that intentional, right? It's really about being intentional with what you are doing now in this season, whatever you're in. With boundaries, this is about kind of setting external limits. What are the things you need to say yes or no to? I recently got to interview Claudia Golden. So she's the Nobel Prize winner in economics for her work on the gender gap. But she talks about this concept of greedy jobs, right? Jobs that just will pull everything from you. Well, work is always going to ask more from you. And so how can you delegate or defer or just delete things from that pile somehow? And then the last one is that bandwidth. And this is kind of about internal boundaries, almost like how you spend your time. And really the central question here for people is, where are you in your calendar, right? And how can we create that bandwidth, that space in there? And I think so often we tell moms about like sleep and rest, and those are super, super important. But I like to encourage people to think more broadly of like, what are you going to plug into? Like, what's the thing that gives you energy as opposed to takes energy from you? And that's going to, again, look really, really different from one person to another, right? Like I've got a client who's on like a hockey team, and that is, yes, uses energy clearly, but it's really fueling for her. And for someone else, it might be, I need a nap every day. All of these things are great options. It's just figuring out, where am I going to show up with input of energy in my calendar?
Such great points. I feel like it is so hard for women to give themselves permission to do something that is different from the norm. So for example, when I was a nurse at this very, very demanding cancer clinic, everyone would eat lunch in the break room and I would eat elsewhere because during lunch, a lot of people talked about work and I really felt like I needed some space and time. How can I be a parent to tiny children, a nurse to really sick cancer patients, and then spend my lunchtime talking about both of those things? Like I wanted to do something refueling. And one of the things that my followers asked, they're like, how don't you feel like a mean coworker? Like everyone else is eating together. Why doesn't it bother you that you're choosing to do something else? So just the idea of it is going to look different for everyone, and working on flexing that muscle of giving yourself permission to do something different, I think is so important.
Yeah. And I think recognizing that can change too. Yep. Like, when my kids were little, I feel like, I had 4 kids, 6 and under, and it was like I lived in a preschool and it was very loud in our house. And so I could not listen to music. Like I couldn't do it. And now, they're tweens and teens and it's different. Like, and now music has become another like really important part. And so just knowing like what works for me now may also not work for me later. And I don't have to commit. I can just try things and see what feels good.
Yeah, absolutely.
A word from our partner, Good Wipes. I just want to let you in on a little secret. You can't always go to the bathroom and then take a shower right away afterwards. I mean, ideally that would be great, but what about those times that you can't do it and you want to go back to work or hanging out with friends and you want to feel clean and you want to feel confident? That's where Good Wipes comes in. So they're going to elevate your everyday hygiene with these premium wipes, and they're infused with botanicals like aloe, vitamin E, and chamomile, which means it's going to be great for your sensitive skin and it's going to be powerful enough to leave you feeling clean. There's also a variety of different scents. So maybe you're somebody who likes the rose water or the shea cocoa. Maybe you're more into lavender or cedar and botanical bliss. Just choose a variety and see which ones you like the most. They're going to be super flushable, free from harsh chemicals, parabens, and dyes, and just overall wonderful for everyone in the family. If you want to upgrade your restroom ritual, you can grab Good Wipes at Target, Walmart, Kroger, and most local grocery stores. And as a special offer for Herself listeners, Good Wipes is giving you your first pack for free. So buy any package, text them your receipt, and get reimbursed almost immediately. So for more details, head to goodwipes.com/herself. Again, that's goodwipes.com/herself to snag a free pack of Good Wipes. Now back to our show.
Okay, so I wanted to get your perspective on the great debate of work-life balance. Where do you fall on it? Do you believe it can exist? Would love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah. And I think we're always going to debate it. And, now we're talking about work-life integration, which is certainly better because it involves this idea that the two are overlapping and can even feed each other. I just like to take it out of the world of noun altogether and move it into the world of verb and talk about work-life balancing. And I think because it's not any sort of static state. Like we're never going to quote find balance, right? And that's literally what happens when you are balancing in real life. Like if you're a listener and you're not driving your car, and you stand on one foot and close your eyes and just pay attention to what your body does, it's moving the entire time you're standing on one foot. Like there are these teeny tiny micro movements, or maybe you like sway to one side and kind of correct yourself, but there's constant movement, and that constant movement, your body's ability to do that is actually what is keeping you up, right? It's kind of responsive to the environment. That's what work-life balancing is over time, right? It's recognizing there are going to be seasons, and they could be short. They could be a week, or they could be long for a year, where I'm going to lean one direction, and maybe it'll feel like I'm doing a lot at work. And then there's going to be seasons where it's a lot at home. And really what we need is the flexibility to be able to shift between those things and recognize that it's a process over time.
Yeah, I feel like in our positions, it's nice now because we can kind of pull ourselves back and kind of see our journeys, where some people right now, they're so in it. And when the pendulum swings one way or the other, what I don't love for women is that I feel like oftentimes it equates to women feeling really bad about themselves. Like if work is having a busy season, they feel like they're not a good enough mom. If motherhood is having a really busy season, we're just getting out of 6th season, a lot of people had really tough stretches, then they feel horrible, like they're not a good employer, they're not a good owner. So I think when we get stuck in this black or white thinking of like, I'm doing good or I'm doing bad, it's just really hard to be happy at either place.
Yeah, but I think that's such a good point. Like, for all of us that have kids, like I'm sure everyone had this feeling, like your baby's 3 months old and they won't sleep, and you just kind of think, I will never sleep again. And it feels like I can't even visualize ever being out of how hard this moment is. And at the same time, kind of cognitively in the background, you recognize that at some point this child will sleep. We don't know how you're going to get there, but it will happen. And if we can kind of hold that same knowledge for that work-life dynamic of, I can be in a hard season with something and hold that I won't be in this forever. It might feel like I'm stuck here. And yet I know from my entire past rest of my life that I'm not going to be stuck. It's going to move somehow.
Yeah, even just having that hope or that understanding that it is temporary, it really can help if you can honestly believe it. Because I know with some personalities, mine included, it's like, okay, but it's still hard right now. Like it doesn't make today any easier. And then it's so easy to fixate on it. But even as you've just been saying these answers, it has just taken me back to all these different parts of working parenthood of, when I was traveling with my corporate job, I was feeling so guilty for being gone that I would try to like double up and just be so present when I was at home. And then when I went part-time, then all of a sudden we had one child that had special needs that was going to, 2 or 3 doctor visits, therapy visits a week. And I felt so bad that I was spending so much time with him, but not the others. And then that went right into an autoimmune condition where I felt this debilitating fatigue. And I felt so guilty for not being able to have energy for my family. And it's just all these different pieces of like, you are the same human. You might even have the same kids, or maybe you're adding kids throughout it, but the guilt can just feel overwhelming. And Dr. Ann, I know that you speak to this idea that guilt, especially in working parenthood, is actually a learned behavior in motherhood. So can you just speak to this? And also, what can Amy and I and all of our listeners do about it?
Yeah. So I think one thing to understand, like a context here, is that we often talk about guilt versus shame in psychology, right? Guilt can be a useful tool. It really should be, right? Like that Jiminy Cricket on your shoulder saying, hey, maybe you shouldn't have done that thing. But it's about traditionally the behavior, like you shouldn't have done that thing. Shame is judging. Shame is more global. You are a bad human or a bad mother for doing that thing. And I think with motherhood and to some extent just with womanhood, we learn that shame piece actually pretty early. And when we say mom guilt, we're often talking about shame, right? It's a feeling of I am a bad mom. we've learned that a quote good woman is a martyr and is always calm and quiet and serving others. And there's this kind of second part to that of if you're not living up to those standards, especially as mother, you should be feeling shamed because you're now failing. You're a bad mom. And we shame ourselves. So when I say it's learned, it's that we've learned that things like setting limits or self-care or time for ourselves are not allowed, right? That a good mom is a martyr and we are flawed and quote bad when we need time. But that's not something that we should feel guilty about at all, right? In fact, being a martyr is not better for our kids. Mm-hmm. That's not helpful. So now, like kind of thinking of that context, what to do about it, it's really important to have context, connection, and choice. So context is what I just talked about, right? Clarity about the role that like structures and systems and socializations play in what we're feeling and like getting some awareness of that. With connection, it's about talking to other people, right? Shame thrives in secrecy. And it's what I love about leading groups, right? Like just yesterday, we were having a discussion about something in our group. And then afterwards, the Slack channel lit up with so many comments of, I thought it was just me, right? The connection around it gave so much relief and was like the guilt just lifted because everyone was like, oh, I'm not alone in this. I don't have to feel like a failure. And then that last one is choice, right? When you make a choice about how to spend your time that's intentional, then you can kind of shed some of the guilt, right? If I, for example, do something for myself, then it's an investment in me and my family because I'll show up better. I'll be more present, right? And so if that guilt bubbles up out of that kind of cultural belief system, I can say, you know what? This is not me taking away time from my kids. This is actually me giving them a present mom on the other side of it. And so like being able to make that switch with guilt can really help.
I loved those examples because, you know, you can just remember your mind saying those things to yourself and like really feeling bad. And then you do work on it over time. You listen to things like this, you go to sessions, like you have to kind of work against it, you know, because I think for a lot of us, it was ingrained in me. Like I didn't have a lot of friends' moms that were working moms. So I didn't see these examples. Okay. One thing we do want to acknowledge is that, like we said before, everyone has a different workplace. And so we know that a lot of the stress is very real. And we know that sometimes workplace policies can really exacerbate it. So we want to know, what are those policies that really seem to exacerbate stress in women, and how can these companies start to change things?
Yeah. And I could talk for like 3 hours on this. So I'll try to keep it brief, kind of the couple biggest, the heaviest hitters. You know, I've surveyed a lot of parents around this. I've worked with a lot of parents in therapy and coaching. And the absolute number one thing is flexibility. Mm-hmm. And flexibility can mean so many things, right? It doesn't have to mean that you get to work from home all the time. But it is actually really important to know that there's data to back up that hybrid and remote work are just as productive as being in the office. So like side note there, but companies get very caught up in inertia. Like we did it this way for so long, we have to keep doing it that way. But the reality, right, is there isn't a difference between taking 5 minutes between calls to throw in a load of laundry if I'm working at home, or taking 5 minutes to like walk down the hall to the water cooler in an office, but the workplaces somehow treat it like that. Meanwhile, the difference to people's lives when we give them flexibility and the ability to work remotely at times is so massive, right? The commute hours, the ability to like pop out and say hi to your kids between calls, or show up for a game, or, you know, if you've got a little one and like to be able to nurse between meetings instead of pumping, like those matter so much. Mm-hmm. And the reality is they're good for non-parents too. Like that's the thing we forget. right? Whatever you've got going on outside of work, flexibility will allow you to do that. Or, I have kids that are neurodivergent, as I mentioned, and for me, thinking about like the future of the workplace and wanting them to be able to show up as whole people and contribute in the best way possible, they're going to need the flexibility too, whether or not they become parents. So flexibility in all sorts of shapes and sizes, right? About when you work, how many hours are worked, all of that, where. But the other big one is workplace culture. And whether that's kind of toxic cultures that are glorifying burnout, or judgmental comments to parents, or microaggressions to women, right? These seemingly small things have a really massive impact on our lives. And again, we can look at the data here. Managers actually have a larger impact on mental health sometimes than even our spouses, because we spend so much time with them. And so when we address the culture at work and focus on kind of wellness as part of the culture, then that makes a huge difference for stress across the board in our lives.
Dr. Ann, with that answer, I can just see our Herself listeners right now thinking about their current place of employment or maybe a previous place and thinking either, wow, I'm so lucky. Like, yes, I have some pretty good culture. Is it perfect? No, like no place is going to be perfect, but doing pretty well. Or, okay, that's why I'm having such a hard time. That's why it feels like such a struggle. That's why I'm so unhappy with the current situation, because you do spend so much of your time in these work environments that, the culture and the flexibility do take a big toll either way, positively or negatively on a life. Let's pause this episode to bring up one of our favorite partners, Element. And the reason we love Element is because it has just helped our health in so many different ways. So an electrolyte imbalance is real. And moms, we feel it so much. So you might think, okay, only professional sports athletes or people that are sweating a whole bunch, those are the people that have an electrolyte deficiency. Wrong. If you're somebody who has headaches, cramps, you suffer from fatigue or brain fog, you might have an imbalance of your electrolytes, and drinking Element can help. They have both the dry mix that you can just pour into water, or they have the sparkling mix, which kind of feels like a fun little drink that you can have. If you're on a low alcohol or maybe you're on a lower sugar type of a kick, that can be great to bring to parties and just sip on that all night long. Each stick, pack, or sparkling can, they deliver a meaningful dose of electrolytes that are free of sugar, artificial colors, and all those other dodgy ingredients that other sports drinks may have. So stay hydrated and have it be delicious by going to drinkelement.com/herself. That's drinklmnt.com/herself to get a free sample pack and try all the different flavors. And now a word from one of our partners, Cornbread Hemp CBD Gummies. If you've been looking for a natural way to relieve the aches, the discomfort, the stress, or your sleepless nights, Cornbread Hemp has a product for you. They taste great. They are so easy to use, and there's something for everybody. So maybe you are looking for just some peace of mind. Maybe you want to feel better in your body. Maybe it is stress that is keeping you just feeling irritated and not being able to unwind. Maybe you just need a little bit of relaxation or a better night of sleep. On their website, it is so easy to shop and figure out, okay, I have this challenge, I have this issue, what can I use in order to make me feel better? And you can peruse the Cornbread website for a product that's going to work for you. Right now, Herself listeners can also save 30% on your first order. This is an amazing discount, and I highly recommend that you take advantage of it. You just head to cornbreadhemp.com/herself and use code herself at checkout. That's cornbreadhemp.com/herself and use code herself. Okay, back to our show. Okay, so you had mentioned in a previous answer about delegating tasks briefly, but let's just really focus in on this question and this answer right now, because as women, we know that asking for and accepting help can be hard, especially for some personalities or some types of people. It's even harder. And maybe someone's in a season right now where they know they need more help, but they're not asking for it, or maybe they haven't accepted it when someone has offered. So how do you help women improve in this area? What can we start to do?
Yeah. I think it's really, really common. And sometimes we even get to the point, like, I think that accepting help is important to note, right? Like I talk about walking back the ask, and I'm so guilty of this. Like I'll ask for something and the response will be, oh, I guess I can do that, but it's not like enthusiastic, and I'll immediately undo the request. I'll be like, never mind, I'll take care of it. And they didn't even say no before I'm saying, never mind, right? So it's like asking and holding on to the ask is really important. But I think there are two things that come up here, two very different things for people that are struggling to ask for help. And one is some elements of people pleasing, or whatever you want to call it, right? You don't want to feel like a burden or a bother, or you think that nobody else is asking for help. And so in that case, I, tell people to start by recognizing it's okay to, quote, inconvenience people. You're not actually inconveniencing them perhaps as much as you think you are. And to like almost flip it on its head and recognize that helping others gives people positive emotions, right? Like when we help, we feel good. And so you're actually giving other people the opportunity to feel good, to feel connected to you. Also to think about what you want to role model for your kids. And I find that can be a really good inroad too, right? If we want them to accept that they can ask for help, then we want to show them that we can also ask for help. And as part of that, working overall on tolerating disappointing others and kind of challenging those overall people-pleasing patterns. The other thing I see coming up, which is a little more complicated, is around asking for help and almost like communication around what that help is. I think so often as women we're told, like, just ask for help. And I see this come up all the time, in particular in couples. And then there's like a conflict around what that help looks like, right? I use the dishwasher as an example. I feel like there are two types of people that load a dishwasher. Some with like, robotic precision, and some looks like a drunk monkey loaded it, and they always marry each other. Like, I swear I have more conversations about the dishwasher with couples than other things. And so if I tend to be more on the precise space. And if my husband loads the dishwasher, it looks very, very different. And I literally had to work very hard to tolerate his loading skills as helpful and not like go in and redo it. So it's like being willing to have the help look a little different than you expected it, as long as the goal is still being met. Right. And so that requires some communication too, right? That might require us to agree ahead of time on what is the goal so that we know what, quote, done looks like. It's not about lowering standards. It's about communicating when you're asking for help. So again, that's like there's a really different things that get in the way. Both show up in the sense of I can't ask for anything.
When we talk about this subject, one piece of feedback that we get, and people are pretty passionate about it, and I see this online a lot too, is women will be like, who's helping me? Like, where is the help? Where is my village? What are you guys talking about? Like, they get really defensive because they feel like they don't have that support, whether they're talking about a partner or in general. Maybe they don't live around their family, or their family doesn't want to help them, or they don't feel like they have friends that are willing to help them. What are the first steps? Like, how do we coach these people into seeing more possibility?
Yeah. So two thoughts. And one is just an example. I think sometimes we don't see the help that might be available. So I had a client once who did a little experiment, and she, around this question, and basically she tried to notice how many people in her life are asking her for help. Right. As starting to see like how that's modeled by other people, but also where are there relationships that could be more reciprocal than I realized. Right. And so it was like a neighbor asked her for something, or someone asked for her to give her kid a ride or whatever. There were all these little ways. And she came back a week later and was like, I've never asked these people for anything. And so maybe I could actually engage. Like, asking for help is vulnerable because the person might say no, and it's a little scary. And so being open to the possibility that maybe there is a little more of a village than you realize out there. But the other thing I've been starting to talk about with clients more lately is like this idea of the new village, right? Many of us don't have family or community nearby, or maybe we do, but we're having kids older and older. So our parents are actually needing help rather than providing help at this point, right? And we're kind of in that sandwich generation. But the new village includes paid support like childcare or domestic help. The new village includes therapists, and the new village includes workplaces, right? That's why I'm such an advocate for systemic change and the kind of the institutional pieces that have to be a part of our village. And then also thinking of your village as friends, even if they can't tangibly help, right? Like I have 3 good friends from college and we live all over the country, and they cannot bring me dinner if I'm having a hard time. They can't babysit my kids, but even just knowing they're out there and that I could connect with a text, whether it's like a real deal, I'm falling apart, or just like, can you send me a silly meme, can be a total lifeline when I'm stressed. And it's why things like online communities can also be really, really helpful, right? It's why I love running groups, because even though, again, this isn't the person that's going to show up and do your dishes for you, the emotional support and holding that you can get through the internet in various ways can be an important part of building that village out.
Absolutely. We always love to remind people, like Abby and I didn't become friends until after we were moms. Our other really good friend, Alina, like we're all in this town and we don't have family here. So we really do show up for each other in ways that you'd expect a family to show up. So I do think we just have to be more open to the idea of like, we truly are in charge of kind of building that village, finding it where we need it, asking for help, helping our friends. So if you're in that mindset, I feel like either you can stay stuck there forever, or you're going to have to start to do some of the things that you're saying or some of the things I'm saying, because otherwise you're not going to feel supported.
Yeah, it's hard. I think there has to be some intentionality in forming relationships. Like we form friendships by repeated exposures to people. That is really what it is. And so that's really easy when you're in school, and it's really hard as an adult, but you can kind of create those over time. And it takes that risk of vulnerability. It takes the ask, but you can do it.
Well, and especially if you are a people pleaser, or if that's a tendency that you have, I think it's almost harder to make friends, because you're always thinking, I don't want to ask for help. I don't want to ask for help. I don't want to ask for help. Some of my greatest friendships have been because we have reciprocatedly asked for help from one another.
Yeah.
And then the trust has grown. I mean, I'm even thinking about this weekend. I'm solo parenting for 4 days, 2 of them being weekend days. I'm bringing nothing to the mix, but Amy and Drew invited me and a couple of people over for dinner. And I'm like, I'm literally just bringing my 3 crazy kids. Like I am bringing nothing to this. Maybe I'll bring a side salad, but yes, I'm going to say yes to this because it's going to help me out so much. In the past, and even in my mind, I have to coach myself and say, Abby, they invited you. They know your situation. You can still say yes, because it is going to help so much and everyone's going to have so much fun. So I think you do have to talk yourself into it, even when you're fully recovered, once in a while, depending on who the person is.
Yeah.
So right away in the beginning of the interview, we talked about how Amy and I have been, at this working parenthood for about 9 years now. And there have definitely been ups and downs and all sorts of changes. And the people who are listening, you probably have felt some of those just from what Amy and I have shared, but they also have those types of situations. I mean, we have been through job changes. We have been through daycare changes. I mean, I have moved. Now we're working for ourselves. So a completely different kind of working environment. I mean, I had a Down syndrome diagnosis that takes a ton of time and attention. So it has taken just a lot of resilience and a lot of prioritization to stay in the workforce. During each of those, would it have been easier in some sense to take a break or to take time off? I mean, I can talk myself into that. Like, yes, could it have been easier? Possibly. But also it's so worth it. Like Amy and I, we love working. It is part of our identity. It is part of our character. It builds our friendship. We feel so good in this role. So we know that it's the right choice for us. But I know it can also be really tricky to make some of those decisions. So can you just start talking about this idea of resilience and prioritization when it comes to work?
Yeah. I mean, I think with prioritization, I tell people just be ruthless, right? Pick your things and turn down everything else. I've got 4 kids. I work. Those kids have a whole alphabet soup of diagnoses between them. And for example, I can't volunteer at school regularly. I'm not on the PTA. I do not coach their teams. I can't make that kind of commitment. And I've just had to say no. I do volunteer in a once-off way throughout the year, right? Like someone falls through, I happen to be free, great, I can sign up for that. I can pop in as like library helper to repair broken books if I've got like a shorter afternoon than expected. I can commit in that way, but I cannot do the rest, and I do not feel guilty about it. So pick your time or how you want to spend your time and just get comfortable with saying no to everything else. But the other thing is about that resiliency is finding your glimmers, right? When we talk about coping tools, we usually focus on how to improve a tough situation or how to get through it. And that's super, super important. That's a ton of what I'll do in therapy. Those are ways to kind of regulate our nervous system when things are more challenging. But what builds our resiliency is kind of the offensive game, right? Those are defensive tools, but I like to advocate for building up your offensive tools. What are you going to do on the offense? That is taking time for things that we enjoy and being present in those things, right? So when I talk about glimmers, and this is based on the work of Deb Dana, who does a lot around a theory called polyvagal theory, it's about finding the things that bring you joy, little or big, right? It might be just like really taking in the moment of like your kids giggling, right? Or, for me, every day I'll do it right after we finish recording. I have a cup of hot tea and I just don't do anything other than drink that tea for like 5 minutes, right? It's not huge, but it brings me a lot of peace in that moment. It might be, like I was saying earlier, it might be that it's a sport that you love to do. It might be taking a nap. It might be yoga, but it also might just be noticing the sunshine on your face if you're out taking a walk or feeling the hot water in the shower. It's just kind of these little micro moments of presence where you feel good, where you feel like a human. And they create this positive feedback loop, right? Because they create a positive emotion in the moment. They tell your brain that you are worth having those positive moments, and they serve as a buffer of future stress. So that's, something we all would love. And then the added bonus is all of those things can be added to that coping toolbox for when things aren't going well. You can pull on those. You've practiced using them. They're more accessible. So it really drives resiliency in all of these different ways.
I always tell Abby, one of my favorite things about aging and maturing is like standing in your decisions and just not feeling bad about every single thing. I think we've all been there when we were younger, when we started parenthood. It's like you're walking around kind of feeling bad about everything. And like now to talk to a woman who is standing before us in her job and being like, here's where I volunteer, here's where I don't feel bad. Like these are the decisions that work for my life. So I hope that you guys really leave this episode inspired to start to make some of those decisions and stand by them and understand why you're doing them. So you have been such a blessing to this podcast. Can you please tell all of our listeners where they can find more of you and your work?
Yeah, the easiest places to find me is certainly my website, which is drannwelsh.com, or on LinkedIn and Instagram. Both are just Dr. Ann Welsh. And from any of those places, people can figure out or read more about working with me in my Working Mothers group or in one-on-one coaching work. And I also just love to hear from listeners too about your thoughts, your feedbacks on the episode. And I like to offer any of your listeners a bonus discount on my next group cohort. So if that's something you're interested in, just let me know you heard me here and I'll get you set up with that too.
I think one of the coolest things about recording podcasts is you never know what you said that's going to stick with someone. Yes. So if you guys want to head over to Dr. Ann and tell her what stuck with you, I'm sure she would love to hear that.
Thank you so much for all those resources, and just make sure you're following them because, yes, I wish I had this type of information earlier in my motherhood journey, earlier in life. I just think it would have been so helpful. And if there's something from today's episode that you know hit home, something that you know others should know about, share it into your story, either with the link or with a photo. Get creative. We love seeing your shares, and make sure to tag Herself Podcast and our guests so that we can reshare it into stories. Thanks again for being here, everyone. We'll talk to you next week.